So today I decided to play this list of Merfolk. I saw some builds were experimenting with Mistcaller, and since I've never tried out the card myself, I figured I would give it a go. Considering it is great versus Indomitable Creativity, Living End, and Yawgmoth, even though in other matchups it does nothing much. I'm still running 2 Silver Gills and 2 Spreading Seas just because a lot of lists are running no Silver Gills, some are running the playset, so I figured I'd go in that middle ground you see some lists running. I also saw some people were playing Force Negation in the main deck again, and I thought I'd try 2 in the main and 2 in the sideboard, and there's nothing too special about the sideboard, but I figured I would try out 2 recalls, so let's begin the gameplay. So we're here for game 1, and also, by the way, I didn't really have the time to speed up the gameplay, so we're just gonna live with it being a bit slower. I'll try to make it interesting. So, this is game 1. We have 2 dismembers in hand. That's not necessary, but it could be useful if we're playing against something like Murktide, or, you know, we basically just see a monkey on the field, a Darcy. So overall, this hand's fine. We also still have 2 Merfolk to give Swaylun indestructible between the Mutavault and the Merfolk Trickster, so that's always useful. And the Trickster is just pretty decent for tapping things down. So overall, while this hand is not perfect, it's pretty decent. We already have 3 lands in hand, so I'm hoping we don't top deck anymore. And that's basically how it goes. And when it comes to turn 1, we just play like an island and pass. You don't want to play the Mutavault out because you want to make sure you have the 2 blue mana out for Merfolk Trickster. And yep, right here we just pass along to our opponent. And here, our opponent decides to play Marsh Flats, and then they pass through. So, Marsh Flats, I mean, that's just a lot of decks, you never know. So remember not to play the Spreading Seas, since if you play Spreading Seas, they'll just, when the Spreading Seas on the if you play Spreading Seas enchanting the Marsh Flats, they'll fetch the Marsh Flats, and then then the Spreading Seas basically does nothing. So, they got a Hollowed Fountain, so already that makes the Spreading Seas kind of meh, because, you know, it's like Hollowed Fountain, so it could be control, could be a variety of decks, but here we are particularly playing against Hammer Time, so the Spreading Seas is actually quite fine for Inkmoth Nexus and Urza Saga. Now, they played a Stoneforge Mystic, and that's just gonna happen. Most of the time when I play against Hammer opponents or Death and Taxes opponents, if they have the Hammer in hand, they'll typically get a Culture Complete, which is quite good versus our deck if we can't deal with it. So this time they got Colossus Hammer, which means they don't have it in hand, and, you know, I just decided to play out the Merfolk Trickster, even though if they do have an Urza Saga and they can make a Construct token or something, it's fine. So we draw Mistcaller. That's pretty useless right now. So I was like, alright, let's get this Swaylun out and just do that. Now, you could argue dismembering the Stoneforge, but remember, they got Hammer, so we don't have any counter magic to make that relevant. So I was like, let's get the Swaylun out and start attacking. The dismembers will probably be more relevant elsewhere. If they got Culture Complete, then yes, you might want to just like see something and use your dismember, but here, I think just playing out the Swaylun was the right play. Now, they go for a Pure Steel Paladin, and that is absolutely what you want to use Dismember on, especially when you see it without a Giver of Runes. You really never want the Pure Steel Paladin to stick around. It just gets so much value, and the ability is really good. So we draw another Mutavault. That's, like, decent. So, we have, like, we can do a few different things. Like, the Mistcaller is pretty useless, so I'm not looking at that right now. But what I'm thinking is, I'm gonna, like, hold on to the Dismember and, like, either play Spreading Seas or activate a Mutavault and attack with it. And since the Spreading Seas is kinda useless right now, I'll just activate a Mutavault and attack with it. And I believe I decided to Dismember the Pure Steel Paladin before they could even declare it as a blocker. I could have probably waited a little, but I was gonna Dismember it anyway, and they probably wouldn't have blocked, so same result, and then they conceded. Now for sideboarding, I decided to cut Force Negation because it is really only good versus a turn 1 Sigurdizade, and if you don't have it turn 1 or 2, it loses a lot of its utility. Also, Stoneforge being able to bring in an uncounterable hammer doesn't really help. Also, this is a matchup where I took out Mistcaller since it doesn't do much, if anything, versus the deck. Now, Hercule's Recall is great to reset the clock versus the deck, so we can have a few more turns to set up a win. I also brought in Harbinger since it'll be able to deal with equipment, brought in to play with Stoneforge, and buy us some time if they have a hammer out with Sigurdizade. And with that said, let's get back into the gameplay. So we're here for game 2, and we're on the draw. And this opening hand, 1 land, Ether Vial. On the draw, it's debatable. With all the double blue sources though, even with us spreading seas, I just really didn't like it and I felt like we could do better. And then we had to mulligan that one. This is keepable at this rate. We're not mulliganing down to 4. So I bought an island and an extra copy of Odalian Hexcatcher, but the first hand if we draw Blue Source, we can cast Spreading Seas and start the game, but versus Hammer, you kind of need to be fast, and if you don't, if it turns out that if you don't draw an island, you're screwed, then I don't like that. So here, I just was like, alright, let's play out Ottawara first, then cast the Ether Vial. We're going to have to say no to the Esper Sentinel, so that is annoying, but, I'm not just gonna not cast my Ether Vial, so. Here our opponent played an Inkmoth Nexus, so that is always a good target for Spreading Seas. And Giver of Ruins is especially annoying with Dismember in hand. The Giver is always annoying when you have like a Harbinger or a Dismember, because it's just like, oh man, this is the only piece of removal I have. And then even with Trickster, it's just annoying because you're only going to be using the one kind of removal or target effect each turn, so it gets frustrating with the Giver. And you could Dismember the Giver of Runes right now or later on, but it's not ever worth it. You're just hoping they attack with it or something, but the Giver of Runes for Merfolk is surprisingly annoying. So here, I believe our opponent just attacked with the Esper Sentinel. Yeah, so that's fine. It's not like we're going to trade with Odalian Hexcatcher. Odalian Hexcatcher has way too much going for it for that interaction to be worth it. So I believe we just played it on our opponent's end step, and they played Pure Steel Paladin, which would be an amazing card to Dismember. Amazing card, but you can't target it because of the Giver. So here I just cast out Odalian Hexcatcher, and our opponent still passed through here, and that is fine. So here, obviously, uptick on the Ether Vial. Want to get it up to the point where you can bring in that Swiloon, unless you draw something like... And the Lord of Atlantis is nice. So we have a few options. We can't really use the Dismember right now, but right now, it seems likely that we should just probably activate the Mutavault. Well, we could also... Well, the Dismember is irrelevant. So what we do is we probably activate the Mutavault and attack with that, but for some reason I didn't do that. Oh, I decided to attack with Odalian Hexcatcher. Fair. Okay, so I decided to attack with Odalian Hexcatcher. And let's see. Okay, so they just decided to take it. So I think I decided to not activate the Mutavault. I was probably gonna see if... Okay, I get the logic here. So what I was hoping they would do is block with the Pure Steel Paladin, then I'd Vial on the Lord, then they give the Pure Steel Paladin protection from blue, and then I would Dismember the Pure Steel Paladin. That was the plan, I think. Decent plan, but my opponent just took it cautionary anyway, might as well take 1 damage. So it would probably be better to Mutavault there, but it wasn't done without thinking. Okay. I forgot about that, honestly. So on that step, obviously, Vialed in the Lord, and here you gotta uptick Ether Vial. You really want the Swiloon in play as soon as, look at their board state, it's crazy out there. So you gotta uptick Vial to get the Swiloon in, but we draw a land anyway, so the uptick Ether Vial is kind of pointless now. So we don't even have Island Walk, which is kind of annoying, and the 2 Pure Steel Paladins is actually annoying, since the second you can try to kill one, they still have a backup, so that's really frustrating actually. So here I'm like, okay, we just gotta attack with like everything and hope. And I had like some combat ideas. So let's see what we did here. So just attacked with the Mutavault and the Lord. I decided Hexcatcher was a little too weak. It's just a 2/2. I was like, let's attack with these. So our opponent, they decided to block the Lord, triple block it. And I'm like, I don't really like the way this looks, but let's see what they do. So I obviously ordered the Pure Steel Paladin first. So yeah. Then I believe our opponent decided to give the other Pure Steel Paladin protection from blue. Yeah. So when they gave it protection from blue, I decided to use that as an opportunity to dismember one of the Pure Steel Paladins. So just wait for that to resolve. And then I was like, alright, we're getting rid of that Pure Steel Paladin. Because, I mean, that's gonna live. Both of them are gonna live regardless. Both of them would live either way. I mean, yeah, the Esper Sentinels are actually really annoying here. But I wanted to kill off one of them at least. Since keeping the Lord around is like really relevant, and slowing that card draw in the future, it's pretty much worth it. But anywho, I decided, let's kill the Pure Steel Paladin that would kill my Lord, and either one, it doesn't matter. And obviously, just file in the Swagoon on their end step. So here, let's see what our opponent does. They just played another land. And then they played another Esper Sentinel. Now that's the third copy in their deck. I believe they actually played they played the play set this game. That was quite funny when I was playing. Just naturally having a play set of Esper Sentinels. Alright, then they played a Ginger Brute. And they only have one card left in hand, but then they decide to go... so they gave Ginger Brute the unblockability clause. And I believe they just swung with it for 1. Now, what's interesting is I remember the last card that our opponent has in hand was Sigarda's Aid. They cast it. Let's just wait for that to happen, actually. But yeah. So on their second main, they cast a Sigarda's Aid. And I wanted to let this resolve. I did. But I told myself something for some reason just felt wrong about them like resolving. It is dumb because they have the Pure Steel and 2 other artifact creatures, right? But they're gonna use their Esper Sentinels to chum block, right? So the thing is, if I can try to hopefully like get rid of those Esper Sentinels through combat and other means, and then get rid of the Sigarda's Aid, the chances of a hammer would be slim. And this probably looks stupid, but I have a Swagoon for like a little bit of defense, and if they can actually get a hammer on the Ginger Brute, that's GG. Looking back on it, I probably just should have let the Sigarda's Aid resolve, but I probably should have let it resolve, but I decided to counter it anyway, just out of them top decking some miracle. So, Druid Trickster, that's just a 2/2 Grizzly Bear because of the Giver of Runes. But here, I believe I just decided to, also I ticked up Vial to 4, but I sided out my subtleties. I didn't side them out. My subtleties are in the sideboard, so that's actually I sided out my subtlety. Okay, but the Vial on 4 is irrelevant. I did that, like, on instinct, like, Vial goes on 4 after on 3, just in case you draw subtlety, but there's no subtleties in the deck, and that was stupid. So here, I, swung with the Swagoon, and just to, like, get the card, we draw another Mutavault. That's not irrelevant, but it's not really what we're looking for right now. Right now, obviously, Hercule's Recall would be a pretty decent card, but there's like a few cards we're just hoping our opponent doesn't draw out of the blue, considering they are empty-handed at this point. And my opponent actually did get a little lucky this game. Alright. So, still holding up the Trickster, but yeah, pretty much irrelevant. And then they draw the Colossus Hammer, and that's unfortunate. Now, I said, okay, well, there's like basically nothing this trickster's gonna do. Let me see if I can try to trick my opponent into forgetting they have the Giver of Runes, and I'll try to tap down the Pure Steel Paladin. So I tried to tap down the Pure Steel Paladin, but that, they obviously caught on. They're like, oh, but I have my Giver of Runes. So, I mean, they were empty-handed, but I was, like, just trying to prevent that, and I was just hoping my opponent would forget. It was, like, a little test, and they definitely did not forget about that Giver. So, the Colossus Hammer has equip 0, and they're gonna start equipping it onto stuff, so that's always fun. So, that honestly was probably, like, I wouldn't say one of the best top decks, but I would say one of the best top decks that our opponent could have. So that was unfortunately lucky for our opponent, and things like that'll happen, but it's kind of unfortunate for us. So, I believe our opponent decided to, make the Ginger Brute unblockable, and then, swing with it, and then at their, second main phase, they re-equipped it to the Pure Steel Paladin, but, yeah, we're really hoping right now for, like, that top deck of Hercule's Recall. That's, like, our main hope that we, top deck right now, so, yeah. So, yeah, they re-equipped it to Esper Sentinel. I thought it'd be Pure Steel. Alright, then they played another Pure Steel Paladin that they happened to top deck, so that's fun. And I'm still trying to hold on to the game, but it's, like, pretty lost from here. Even if we get, like, a Tide Shaper for Island Walk doesn't help. And, like, Vodalian Hexcatcher is nice. That's always nice, but it's not really what we need. And I just was like, okay, I'm pretty lost right now. I'll attack with Splayloon, hope we draw a Recall or something. See if that will get us out of here. We draw Ether Vial, that's basically useless, and then I conceded. Alright, so here we're on the play, and this opening hand, I don't really like it, especially for Hammer. It's definitely not ideal, because, like, Tide Shaper, yeah, it's decent for interaction, but do we really want to mulligan this? It's decent. I dislike the hand. I don't think it's good versus the matchup, but I don't think I'm gonna risk mulliganing a decent hand, I mean, turn 1, play Vial, turn 2, hopefully see something important, turn 3, get Splayloon out, have Mutavault for indestructibility, start getting card draw. It's just a decent hand, There's nothing... we can do better. We absolutely can. I just don't feel like potentially getting worse, So here, obviously, just play out the Ether Vial, turn 1, and then pass from here, and let's see how badly I regret keeping this opening hand. So, our opponent decided to play an Inkmoth Nexus, which is a great target for Tide Shaper, so at least that's looking somewhat good. So he's played Spring Wastrel. That's kind of annoying, especially if they have an Ornithopter or a Memnite, but they don't, so they just pass through, so that's decent for us. Alright, so over here, obviously uptick the Ether Vial, put that Vial onto a 1, and we're just probably, we drew another Tide Shaper, so that gives us even more incentive vision to, Spreading Seas the Inkmoth Nexus, Tide Shaper the Inkmoth Nexus, that way, even if they have we don't have to even think about them having an Urza Saga, we'll have another Tide Shaper to deal with said Urza Saga. So, from here, we just pass. They play a little coast, and then they decided to play out a Stoneforge. There's nothing much we can do about that, so just let it resolve. Let's do it. Let the Stoneforge do its thing. And I believe they tutored... Let's see what they tutored for, actually. I forget. And they got a Shadow Spear. So that is always a bad sign when they get the Shadow Spear. Because that's like saying, I've got the hammer, you're gonna see the Shadow Spear. Like, if they tutor for Shadow Spear, you know things aren't looking up for you. So that was not the best sign for me. So I uptick the Ether Vial, can't play out the Smiloon. So also the Trickster's annoying because they just played Giver of Runes. So I decided to cast out the Tide Shaper because if they don't have another white source, we can prevent something like Pure Steel Paladin and kind of slow them down. I believe I did decide to go seize the land. I think I did. But it is like, by this point, if they have the Springleaf, you'd assume if they hadn't Urza Saga, they would have played it out like right now, since that's a pretty ideal turn to do so. First, I guess I decided to attack with Tide Shaper, though, see what's up, see if they want to block or anything, and they decided not to. Alright, so second main, I mean, they would definitely not block, but I just wanted to wait till second main. So, here, play out the Tide Shaper. I'm like, let's see if I can at least stall some of their threats. Like, if they're living off of one white source being the Springleaf Drum, that can get clunky after a while. But unfortunately, they had the planes, and then I believe they were able to cast a Pure Steel Paladin. So that was pretty unfortunate for us. And they still have the Giver of Runes up, and then they played the Shadow Spear. So we're just like seeing, do they have the hammer? It's absolutely, positively, very likely they have a Colossus hammer, and there's the hammer. But you want to see. Now at this point, I'm dead lost. They have that Giver of Runes. It's basically law. They're gonna equip the Shadow Spear onto something. Yeah, they have the Shadow Spear, the Springleaf Drum, and then the Colossus Hammer to get the 3 artifacts out. They're gonna equip a Shadow Spear and like a hammer onto the thing, so onto the Giver of Runes. So I'll like target the Pure Steel Paladin, and then they'll tap their Giver of Runes, which will technically stall me a turn because they would attack this turn, but because with the Giver of Runes probably, it would be odd for them not to attack for like, 12 damage or something, and then gain 12 life. But because the Pure Steel Paladin does have Summoning Sickness, that does buy us a little bit of time. So the Trickster kind of worked, kinda. Over here, I'm like, let's get a Swiloon out, but oh man, this board state looks pretty bad. So here, that looks gruesome. You want to play out that master and just attack with everything because you have Island Walk, but that stupid Mutafall is not helping. So, Violed into play, the Swiloon, and really can't attack with anything here. It'd be nice if I could get that master out, but not well. I wonder if it would, like, if I knew that I had a master on top, I wonder if it would have been better if I kept the vial on 2. I would be, in that scenario, which I would still take up the Ether Vial, but we would be able to swing for 9 damage, which is still, and then they played out a Saga, and then we already used our other Tide Shaper 2 turns earlier. So, overall, this game's not looking good for us. There are ways to come back, obviously, but remember, even if we're, like, crossing our fingers for Hercule's Recall, we don't even have the mana to cast it, because we have a Cavernous Souls and a Mutavault. So what we're really praying for is Island, then attack with Swiloon, draw Hercule's Recall, and then still somehow stabilize after that. Not looking good. Not looking good. So they equipped onto the Stoneforge, and they're gonna start attacking for a hefty amount of damage. And, you know, without the Shadow Spear, I think this would be manageable. The Trample and Lifelink, they don't help us right now. So, I'm like, any chance I have of winning this game, like, comes down to keeping these random dorks on the field and then swinging for a lot with the Lord, with my master. So, I feel like living these dorks, like, my only chance is seriously basic land or blue source, and, like, draw the Hercule's Recall. So that's, like, my only hope, and in that scenario, I want to have as big of a board state as possible to combat my opponent's ridiculous amount of life right now. So that's how it is. Like, we are in such a bad spot right now. Yeah. Ether Vial, just leave it on 3, and yikes. What's nice about leaving the Ether Vial on 3 is we can attack with Sway Loon, and then Vial on another one to help chum block if we don't get the draw. We draw Master the Pearl Trident, which is so incredibly clunky right now. It just wasn't this wasn't this was just a little bit of it wasn't our best game, we'll put it that way. And then they pathed the Suilun, and I'm like, alright, this is basically over. We do get our basic land, but it enters tab, so like too late? Not like I'm attacking with anything. It's basically GG. I was basically just sitting this out to just wanted to see, make sure my opponent doesn't accidentally skip through their combat step, and I can still vial in a Suilun to like chum the Pure Steel Paladin and like try to survive. They play a Sigarda's Aid. Fine, that's irrelevant right now. They attacked with the Pure Steel Paladin. I'm like, alright, let's violence Suilun, see if that'll save me. And let's see, I believe our opponent our opponent gave the final blow with the Giver of Runes, giving it protection from blue, and I'm like, alright, yep, GG. Good game. Bye.